I processed 63 reports before the one that mattered. They were ordinary. Boundary drift between minor trade routes. A complaint regarding atmospheric tax discrepancies on a mining outpost that did not technically possess an atmosphere. One dispute involving docking priority that escalated into a formal grievance because neither party understood the difference between urgency and importance. I logged them all. I classified them. I sent them upward where they became someone else's concern. This is my function. My designation is Arven 12, Records Officer, 3rd Tier Administrative Authority assigned to the Compact Vessel Quiet Resolve. I have served for 187 cycles. I have documented 22 engagements, 5 first contact events, and 1 incident involving a nutrient synthesizer failure that resulted in 3 formal apologies and a policy revision. I say this so you understand the scale at which I operate. Nothing surprises me. The 64th report arrived without distinction. It did not announce itself. It did not carry priority markers or emergency flags. It entered my queue the same way all things enter my queue, quietly, efficiently, without intention. I opened it. Military suppression incident. Outer sector, disputed corridor H9. A patrol unit had intercepted a human convoy operating without a registered transit code. Communication attempts were logged as incomplete. The patrol commander authorized a controlled strike to disable forward propulsion and enforce compliance. This was routine. I recorded it as such. 1 vessel destroyed. 2 immobilized. No compact casualties. I applied the correct classification. My hands did not hesitate. They have not hesitated in 187 cycles. Then I reached the manifest. Human convoys in outer sectors are predictable. Agricultural expansion. Colony migration. Resource redistribution. They move quickly, inefficiently by our standards, but with a consistency that suggests confidence rather than error. The manifest reflected this. Soil processors. Water filtration units. Personal cargo. Passenger classification. Non-combatant dependence. I read the line once. Then again. Then I stopped reading and started counting. There were 9 children listed on the manifest. Of the 9, 6 had reached emergency pods. 6 had been recovered. 3 had not. I did not move past that number. There is a version of me that would have. The version that processed the previous 63 reports. The version that understands that numbers are units, not meanings. That version would have continued. Logged it. Filed it. Closed the report and moved forward without disruption. I remained where I was. 3. It is not a large number. It does not disrupt statistical models. It does not trigger escalation protocols. It does not even qualify as significant loss under standard military doctrine. It sat on the page with complete indifference. Below it, itemized with the precision required of all manifests, was a list of recovered personal effects. Clothing. Identification tags. Nutrient packs. And 1 entry that did not belong. Portable audio device. Child designation. Owner reference 2 of 9. Owner reference 2 of 9 was not among the 6 recovered. I read that line more times than I am prepared to quantify. Not because I doubted its accuracy. Because I recognized something I could not immediately place. After 187 cycles, you develop a sense for irregularities that are not errors. Errors are simple. Errors can be corrected. This was not an error. This was correct. And because it was correct, it was wrong. I leaned back from the console and allowed the report to remain open. There is a difference between seeing information and holding it. I held it. 3. A number that did not matter. A number that should not matter. A number that refused to become anything else. I accessed the patrol commander's summary. Controlled deterrence. Minimal collateral impact. Situation resolved. The language was precise. Efficient. Entirely within expectation. I have written similar summaries myself. I have approved them. I have never questioned them. I poured a measure of kef. We do not drink for comfort. We drink to stabilize. To create a boundary between what is and what is being processed. I held the glass for a moment before consuming it. 3. I found myself returning to it without instruction. There are numbers that exist in isolation, and there are numbers that connect. This one connected. I did not yet know how. I opened a secondary database. Not because procedure required it, because something beneath procedure suggested I should. Historical Incident Archive. Filter parameters. Human involvement, civilian casualties, escalation outcomes. The system processed the request and returned 11 results. 10 were minor. Disputes. Compensation. Negotiations that concluded with adjusted boundaries and revised agreements. 1 was restricted. The file icon was unmarked. No summary. No preview. Access required clearance beyond what most officers would possess. I possess it. I have never used it. I considered ignoring the file. This is an important moment. Most things that change outcomes can be traced to a single decision that appears insignificant at the time. This was one of those decisions. I accessed the file. It opened without resistance. The designation was brief. Incident Assessment, Lathin System Collapse. I recognized the name. Not as a current entity. As an absence. The Lathin no longer exist. The file contained 27 pages. The first 25 were operational data. Fleet movements. Engagement timelines. Communication transcripts. All of it structured. All of it clear. Page 26 was labeled Cause of Incident. I read it once. I did not understand it. I read it again. Understanding is not always immediate. Sometimes it arrives as pressure. Something internal shifting to accommodate a new structure. I closed the file. I did not need to read page 27. I already knew what it would contain. Extinction notation. I returned to the report. The 64th report. The number remained where I had left it. 3. It was no longer the same number. It carried context now. I poured another measure of kef. I did not drink it immediately. There is a moment when you recognize that a piece of information will not remain contained. That it will expand. That it will require action. I have spent 187 cycles avoiding that moment. I am very good at avoiding it. This time I did not. I opened a communication channel. Priority request. Audience with Fleet Commander Ethren. The request was submitted. The reply arrived in under 1 minute. The commander was unavailable for non-essential matters. This was expected. I composed a second message. I did not use standard phrasing. I did not apply diplomatic cushioning. I used 3 words I have never used in a formal request. Urgent. Immediate. I included a reference to the file. Not by name. By implication. There was a delay. For minutes. Long enough to indicate consideration. Short enough to indicate concern. The reply arrived. The commander would see me in the next cycle. I closed the communication channel. The report remained open. The number remained unchanged. 3. I finally consumed the kef. It did not alter the number. It did not reduce it. It did not make it easier to process. Some things do not respond to adjustment. Some things simply remain. I sat at my station for the remainder of the cycle. I did not process additional reports. I did not close the 64th. I allowed it to exist. There is a tendency among records officers to believe that everything can be resolved through classification. That if something is properly labeled, it becomes manageable. This is incorrect. Some things resist classification. Some things are not meant to be filed. They are meant to be recognized. I recognized this. Not completely. Not clearly. But enough. When the vessel lighting shifted to rest cycle, I did not leave my station. I remained. I reviewed the report again. The manifest. The personal effects. The audio device. I attempted to understand why that detail persisted. Why it had anchored itself. Humans assign value to objects differently than most species. They attach memory to utility. Emotion to function. A device designed to produce sound becomes something else when carried by a child. I do not fully understand this. I do not need to. Understanding is not required for recognition. The recognition was simple. The object mattered. Because of who it belonged to. Owner reference 2 of 9. Not recovered. I closed my eyes for a brief interval. Not to rest. To isolate the number. 3. I attempted to reduce it. Convert it back into data. A statistic. A variable. It did not reduce. It remained specific. Defined. Attached. I opened the restricted file again. I navigated directly to the cause of incident section. I read the single word. This time, I understood it. Not intellectually. Structurally. The word was not a description. It was a trigger. I closed the file. I returned to my primary display. The 64th report. Still open. Still waiting. There are moments when the future becomes visible. Not in detail. Not in certainty. In direction. This was one of those moments. I did not yet know what would follow. I knew that something would. Because I had seen it before. Not personally. But in record. And records persist. They exist so that patterns can be recognized. So that outcomes are not surprises. I looked at the number one final time before ending the cycle. 3. It was not large. It was not dramatic. It did not justify fear. It justified attention. And attention, in my experience, is the first step toward understanding that something has already begun. I did not close the report. That is not standard procedure. Reports are meant to move. They enter the system, they are processed, they are classified, and they leave. Stagnation is inefficiency. Inefficiency is corrected. I allowed the 64th report to remain open on my primary display. There are moments when process becomes secondary to observation. This was one of those moments. I enlarged the manifest. Not the entire document. Just the section that contained the passengers. 9 entries. Each with designation, age classification, dependency status. 6 marked recovered. 3 not. I read the names. This is also not standard. Names are not required for classification. Numbers are sufficient. Numbers are cleaner. They do not carry unnecessary weight. Humans do not structure their records this way. They include names. I read them once. Then again. Not because I intended to remember them. Because I could not avoid doing so. There is a difference. Owner reference 2 of 9. The device. I accessed the recovered items log. The device had been partially damaged. Outer casing fractured. Internal components exposed. Still recognizable. Still categorized. Still listed as an object. I requested the attached visual record. This required a secondary authorization. I provided it. The image loaded in under a second. It was small. Designed for portability. Constructed with a degree of aesthetic consideration that exceeded its functional requirements. Humans do this. They create objects that are more than necessary. The casing was marked. Not with identification code. With surface modification. Irregular lines. Color variation. Manual alteration. I increased the resolution. It was not damage. It was decoration. Applied without precision. Without symmetry. Without purpose beyond expression. A pattern created by someone without training. A child. I minimized the image. Not because I had finished examining it. Because continuing to examine it was not producing new information. I returned to the report. The number had not changed. 3. Numbers do not change. Interpretation does. I opened a new query. Cross-reference, human convoy incidents involving dependent casualties. The system returned 23 results. This was more than expected. I filtered further. Severity threshold, non-critical engagements. Results reduced to 7. I began reviewing them. Each followed a similar structure. Minor conflict. Unintended damage. Formal response. Resolution. Compensation. Closure. I read all 7. In each case, the outcome was contained. Localized. Predictable. None escalated beyond their initial scope. None resembled the restricted file. I sat back. There was a disconnect. The restricted file represented total collapse. These 7 represented controlled response. The 64th report aligned with the 7. Not the 1. And yet, I returned to the number. 3. I accessed the restricted file again. Direct navigation. Cause of incident. The word remained. unchanged. It had not expanded. It had not clarified. It had not needed to. I closed the file more slowly this time. There is a difference between reading something and accepting it. I had read it. I had not yet accepted it. I returned to the 64th report. I read the patrol commander's summary again. Controlled deterrence. Minimal collateral impact. I paused at that phrase. Minimal. Defined by what standard? Quantified against what expectation? I opened the doctrine reference. Collateral thresholds for suppression operations. The numbers aligned. 3 fell within acceptable range. The classification was correct. Everything was correct. I felt a brief and unfamiliar hesitation. Not uncertainty. Recognition of a gap. Doctrine measures outcome. It does not measure consequence. These are not the same. I accessed the communication logs from the incident. Standard hailing attempts. No response. Engagement authorization. Execution. After-action report. No anomalies. No deviation. No indication of error. I searched for outbound human transmissions following the incident. There were none. This was not unusual. Convoys under distress often lose communication capability. I expanded the time frame. Still none. I expanded further. Silence. I checked adjacent sectors. Human traffic continued. Uninterrupted. Unchanged. The silence was localized. Contained to the convoy. This aligned with expected outcome. I noted it. Then I stopped. There is a point where observation transitions into pattern recognition. I had reached it. The silence was not global. It was not systemic. It was specific. Targeted. I returned to the restricted file. Timeline section. I located the entry. 72 hours prior to first engagement, human outbound signals ceased. I compared the timestamps. The convoy incident. Current time. Elapsed duration. I performed the calculation twice. Not because it was complex. Because it required confirmation. We were within the same interval. Not exact. Close enough. I sat with that. Numbers again. This time, not static. Moving. Approaching alignment. I minimized all secondary windows. I left only 2 displays active. The 64th report. The restricted file. They occupied equal space. Past and present. Separated by time. Connected by structure. I observed them without interaction. There are moments when action is not the correct response. Recognition is. I recognized the similarity. Not in scale. Not yet. In sequence. Event. Casualties. Silence. I stood. This was not necessary. There was no functional reason to leave my station. I did so anyway. Movement can assist processing. The administrative wing was quiet. It is designed to be. Efficiency requires minimal distraction. I walked without destination. Past identical workstations. Past identical personnel engaged in identical tasks. Everything in order. Everything controlled. I stopped at a viewport. Space is not silent. This is a common misconception. There is always signal. Radiation. Transmission. Residual energy. It is not quiet. It only appears that way. I returned to my station. The reports remained. Unchanged. I initiated a secondary process. Personal log. This is not required. It is permitted. Used primarily for internal reference. I do not often utilize it. I opened a new entry. Cycle 187. Day 112. Observation. I paused before writing. There is a difference between recording and acknowledging. This required acknowledgement. I typed a single line. The number persists. I considered adding more. I did not. Excess detail can obscure clarity. I saved the entry. I returned to the main display. The 64th report. The number. 3. It had not diminished. It had not integrated. It remained distinct. I accessed the patrol unit registry. Commander designation. I retrieved his service record. Consistent performance. No disciplinary action. High compliance rating. I opened his previous reports. They were identical in structure. Identical in tone. Efficient. Accurate. Correct. I found no deviation. I did not expect to. This was not an issue of error. It was an issue of perception. I closed his file. I reopened the manifest. The names. I read them again. This time, I did not attempt to avoid retention. I allowed them to remain. Not because it was necessary. Because removing them was no longer possible. I returned to the personal effects. The device. I opened the image again. The markings. Irregular. Unstructured. Intentional. I increased magnification. There were additional details. Small indentations. Surface wear consistent with repeated handling. This was not a new object. It had been used. Frequently. I closed the image. I did not need further detail. The object was understood. Not functionally. Contextually. I leaned back. There is a tendency to search for escalation indicators. Signals that something is increasing in severity. This was not increasing. It was aligning. Alignment is more dangerous. Escalation can be managed. Alignment proceeds. I checked the system time. Another calculation. We were approaching the threshold. I opened the communication interface. I did not send a message. Not yet. I prepared it. Recipient, Fleet Commander Arven. Subject, Incident Correlation. I left the body empty. There is a difference between preparing to act and acting. Preparation allows for precision. I returned to the displays. The 64th report. The restricted file. Side by side. Past and present. 3. One word. Both insufficient on their own. Together. I did not complete the thought. Completion was not required. Recognition was. I closed my eyes briefly. Not to rest. To isolate. The number. The silence. The pattern. I opened them again. The system remained unchanged. The vessel remained orderly. The processes continued. Nothing had happened. This is an important detail. Nothing had happened. That is how these things begin. Not with disruption. With continuity. Uninterrupted function. Stable systems. Correct reports. Accurate classifications. And beneath it, a number that does not integrate. A silence that does not resolve. A pattern that has already completed its first step. I placed my hands back on the console. I did not close the report. I did not reclassify it. I did not escalate it. Not yet. There is a moment before action. A narrow interval where everything is still theoretical. We were still within that interval. Not for long. I looked at the number one final time before initiating the next process. 3. It was still small. It was still acceptable. It was still within doctrine. And it was no longer contained. I sent the message at the beginning of the next cycle. Not immediately. Precision matters. Timing matters more. The system had shifted from rest cycle to operational cycle. Personnel were active. Channels were monitored. Responses would be seen. I completed the body of the message. I did not include the number. I referenced the report. I referenced the restricted file. I used structured language. Then I added one line outside structure. Recommend immediate review of correlation. I transmitted it. The confirmation returned in less than a second. Receipt acknowledged. No immediate reply. This was expected. Fleet Commander Arven does not respond quickly. He responds correctly. There is a difference. I returned to my station and resumed observation. The 64th report remained open. The restricted file remained accessible. I did not open it again. Repetition does not produce new data. I monitored the communication logs. Human channels remained active. Commercial frequencies carried routine traffic. Navigation beacons continued transmission. No indication of disruption. No indication of awareness. Everything proceeded. I recorded the time. Then I waited. Waiting is not passive. Waiting is structured observation. You look for deviation. You measure absence. You confirm continuity. The reply arrived 38 minutes later. Not from the commander. From his office. Formal acknowledgement. Review scheduled. No urgency classification applied. This was incorrect. Not procedurally. Contextually. I opened a new entry in my personal log. Cycle 187. Day 113. Second observation. The pattern is not recognized. I saved it. I did not expand. There was nothing to expand. Recognition had not occurred. Not at the required level. I closed the log. I checked the time again. Another calculation. The interval narrowed. I accessed the restricted file. Not the cause section. The timeline. I read each entry carefully. Event. Response. Delay. Silence. Then escalation. Each step measured. Each step recorded. Each step followed. I compared it again. Not to confirm similarity. To measure difference. There was one. The current event was smaller. Contained. Localized. The previous was not. Scale differed. Sequence did not. I closed the file. I stood. Movement again. Not necessary. Still useful. I walked the administrative corridor. Personnel acknowledged me. I acknowledged them. Nothing in their behavior indicated deviation. No one had noticed. This is also important. Patterns are rarely recognized collectively. They are recognized individually, then either ignored or acted upon. I returned to my station. The system flagged a minor update. Communications log adjustment. I opened it. One of the human commercial frequencies had gone silent. Not all. What? This is how it begins. Not everything. Something. I checked the timestamp. It aligned. I marked it. I did not escalate. Not yet. I monitored the remaining channels. All active. Unchanged. I waited. 7 minutes later, a second frequency ceased transmission. No error. No distortion. No interference. Just absence. I documented it. The frequency. Status. I added it to the personal log. Third observation. Silence is selective. I paused after writing it. Then I added a second line. Selection implies intent. I saved the entry. I sat back. This was no longer theoretical. It had moved into confirmation. I opened the prepared message to the commander. I modified the subject. From correlation to progression. I added the new data. 2 frequencies. Time intervals. Pattern alignment. I removed unnecessary language. Clarity increases response probability. I transmitted the update. This time, the reply came faster. 12 minutes. Acknowledgement. Review advanced. Still no urgency classification. Still incorrect. I leaned back from the console. There is a point where procedural correctness becomes irrelevant, where the system continues to function exactly as designed, and the design is insufficient. We had reached that point. I opened the restricted file again. Cause of incident. I looked at the word. I did not read it. I observed it. There is a difference. Reading processes language. Observation processes meaning. I closed the file. I returned to the communication logs. A third frequency went silent. Then a fourth. Not simultaneously. Sequentially. Measured. Intentional. I tracked each one. Logged each one. Time intervals consistent. Not random. Not failure. Removal. I opened the human public broadcast aggregate. Still active. Unchanged. Internal communication continued. External communication reduced. The distinction was clear. They were not losing capability. They were narrowing output. Directed silence. I felt a brief and unfamiliar response. Not fear. Recognition of inevitability. I have reviewed enough records to understand what comes after pattern confirmation. It does not reverse. It proceeds. I checked the time again. We were approaching the threshold. I stood once more. I walked to the viewport again. Space remained unchanged. Signal still present. Movement still distant. Nothing visible. This is how it appears. Before I returned to my station, the system flagged an incoming directive. From command. I opened it immediately. Fleet-wide notice. Monitoring human communication irregularities. Assessment pending. No escalation. Observation only. I read it twice. It was accurate. It was insufficient. I open my personal log again. Fourth observation. Recognition has begun. I paused, then added, response has not. I saved it. I closed the log. I looked at the report again. The 64th. Still open. Still unchanged. 3. The number had not altered, but its position had. It was no longer an isolated data point. It was origin. I checked the communication logs again. 6 frequencies now silent. Then 9. The pattern accelerated. Not randomly. Deliberately. I stopped tracking individual entries. I began tracking total. This was more efficient, more accurate, more indicative. The number decreased steadily. 43 total external frequencies. 34 active. Then 31. Then 27. No interruption in internal networks. No sign of distress. No indication of damage. Only removal. I accessed the restricted timeline again. I did not need to. I already knew the entry. 72 hours prior. All outbound signals ceased. We were not yet there, but we were moving toward it. Consistently. I sat very still. Movement was no longer required. Everything that needed to be observed was present. The system continued to function. Reports continued to arrive. Personnel continued to work. Nothing had changed. Except the numbers. I looked at the report again. Then at the communication log. Then at the restricted file. 3 points. 1 line. I understood it now. Completely. Not intellectually. Structurally. The sequence had begun. It would complete. There was no mechanism to interrupt it. Not within current parameters. Not within current understanding. I opened a new message. Not to the commander. To myself. Personal log. Final entry for the cycle. The silence has started. I saved it. I did not close the report. I did not close the logs. I did not leave my station. I remained. And I watched as the number of active frequencies continued to fall. One by one. Without error. Without interruption. Without sound. Until the system that had always been full of signal began, slowly and precisely, to become quiet. By the time the last external frequency went dark, no one raised an alarm. This is not an exaggeration. There were notes in the system. Flags. Internal messages exchanged between communications staff. A request for diagnostic review. A preliminary report suggesting possible interference from stellar activity. All of it correct. All of it irrelevant. I marked the time. The final transmission did not end with distortion. There was no static. No signal degradation. It was present. Then it was not. I wrote it down. External human communications, 0. I did not add interpretation. Interpretation had already been completed. I opened the restricted file again. Timeline. 72 hours prior to first engagement. All outbound signals ceased. I checked our time. Aligned. Not approximately. Precisely. I sat with that. There are moments when confirmation does not produce action. It produces stillness. This was one of those moments. The system continued to operate. Internal communication channels remained active. Human domestic networks continued to transmit. I accessed one. A civilian broadcast. A discussion regarding agricultural yield projections on a colony installation. 2 individuals speaking calmly. Measured tone. No indication of urgency. No mention of the convoy. No mention of loss. No acknowledgement. This is important. They were aware. And they were not reacting. Not outwardly. I minimized the feed. I did not need to continue watching. The absence of reaction was the reaction. I opened my personal log. Cycle 187. Day 114. Entry. The silence is complete. I paused, then added, it is directed. I saved it. I leaned back from the console. This is the point where most systems would escalate, where alarms would activate, where command would initiate response protocols. None of that occurred, because there was no trigger, no attack, no intrusion, No violation of defined parameters. Only absence. Absence does not trigger alarms. It bypasses them. I checked the internal command channel. Fleet Commander Arven had issued an update. Communications anomaly acknowledged. Full analysis underway. No immediate threat identified. Maintain standard operations. I read it once. Then again. The language was precise. Accurate within its framework. Incorrect beyond it. I did not respond. There was nothing to respond with that would be accepted. Not yet. I opened a new process. Not standard. Personal preparation. This is not something recorded in official procedure. It exists outside documentation. I accessed my private storage. I began compiling files. The 64th report. The restricted file. My personal logs. Communication records. I transferred them to an external archive unit. Portable. Designed for redundancy. I verified the transfer twice. Not because failure was likely. Because accuracy matters. I placed the unit in my lower drawer. Within reach. I closed the drawer. I returned to the console. The silence remained. Unchanged. Complete. I checked the time again. Another calculation. The next phase would begin. Not immediately. Not visibly. But it would begin. I opened the internal personnel directory. I selected a contact. Designation, Lyra 5. Logistics Coordinator. Assigned to Civilian Transit Hub in Sector 12. Reliable. Efficient. Capable of interpreting indirect communication. I opened a message channel. I did not use standard language. I used routing terminology. Shipment delay. Route instability. Recommendation. Consider alternate transfer. She would understand. Not the full meaning. Enough. I sent it. The reply arrived in 3 minutes. Clarification requested. Severity? I paused before responding. There are degrees of warning. Too much detail creates disbelief. Too little creates inaction. I selected a middle point. Recommend immediate review. I transmitted it. No further explanation. She did not reply immediately. She would process it. She would decide. That was sufficient. I closed the channel. I returned to observation. The vessel remained unchanged. Operations continued. No deviation. No visible concern. This is how systems fail. Not through collapse. Through continuation. I accessed the human domestic network again. Different feed. A local broadcast. A man speaking. Identified as a community representative. He was discussing water allocation. Resource distribution. His tone was calm. Measured. Controlled. He paused once. Very briefly. Then continued. There was no visible distress. No escalation. No urgency. I watched for several minutes. Then I stopped. There was nothing to gain. Everything that mattered was already present. I opened the restricted file one final time. Cause of incident. I looked at the word. I did not need to read it. I understood it. Fully. I closed the file. I did not open it again. I returned to my personal log. I added one more line. Sequence confirmed. I did not elaborate. Elaboration was unnecessary. The pattern was complete. The only remaining variable was response. Not ours. I checked the long-range sensor logs. Routine scans. No anomalies. No unusual movement. No deviation. Empty. This is also part of the pattern. There is always a period of apparent nothing. A gap. Between silence and action. It exists to create false stability. To allow incorrect assumptions. To reinforce the belief that nothing is happening. Something was happening. It was simply not visible yet. I closed the sensor logs. I returned to the report. The 64th. Still open. Still unchanged. 3. The number had not moved. It had not grown. It had not reduced. It had completed its function. It had initiated the sequence. Nothing more was required of it. I sat with that. There is a point where cause and effect separate, where the initiating action is no longer connected to the outcome in any visible way. We had reached that point. The cause was small. The effect would not be. I checked the time. Another interval passed. Still nothing on sensors. Still silence on external channels. Still normal operation internally. Perfect conditions for misinterpretation. I opened a new message. To command. I did not send it. Not yet. I reviewed it. Language precise. Data accurate. Conclusion implicit. I held it. Timing matters. Sending it too early would reduce its impact. Too late would make it irrelevant. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Then the sensor log updated. A single entry. Uncategorized movement. Distance, extreme. Signature, unclear. I opened it immediately. The reading was faint. At the edge of detection. Not enough data for classification. Not enough for identification. Only enough to register presence. I marked the time. I compared it. The interval matched. Exactly. I did not hesitate. I sent the message to command. Priority override. Subject. Contact. Body. Movement detected. Pattern alignment confirmed. I transmitted it. No delay. No modification. No additional explanation. There was nothing else to add. The reply came faster than any previous. Immediate acknowledgement. Command review initiated. I lean back. There is a moment when uncertainty ends. This was that moment. The pattern had completed. The next phase had begun. I looked at the sensor reading again. Still faint. Still distant. Still unclassified. I opened my personal log. Final entry for the sequence. Contact imminent. I paused. Then added. They are coming. I saved it. I closed the log. I did not move. I did not prepare further. There was nothing left to prepare. The silence had done its work. The pattern had completed. The only thing that remained was arrival. And arrival, in my experience, is never early. It is always exactly on time. The sensor reading did not increase in strength immediately. It remained at the edge of detection. This is important. A threat that announces itself is manageable. A threat that does not is something else. I monitored the signal continuously. It fluctuated within expected parameters for long-range distortion. No acceleration spike. No identifiable formation. No fleet structure. Just presence. Command issued a preliminary notice. Unidentified movement under observation. All departments maintain standard readiness. No escalation. I read the notice. It was correct. It was incomplete. I opened the sensor history again. I overlaid the data. Past readings. Current reading. Projected trajectory. The system attempted classification. It failed. Not because the data was insufficient. Because the data did not match known patterns. I recorded that. Unclassified does not mean unknown. It means unmatched. I did not send it. I kept it. Some observations are not useful to others. Only to the one observing. I checked the communication logs again. No change. External silence remained absolute. Internal networks continued without disruption. I opened the human domestic feed again. A different channel. A rural broadcast. A man working. Soil processing equipment behind him. He was speaking to someone off camera. Not an audience. Not a broadcast. A conversation being transmitted. He paused once. Looked up. Not at the camera. Past it. Then continued. No alarm. No urgency. No signal. I closed the feed. There was nothing left to confirm. They knew. They had already decided. I returned to the sensors. The reading strengthened. Slightly. Enough to refine. Multiple signatures. Not one. I adjusted the filter. Separated the signal. Counted. Then counted again. The number increased. Not rapidly. Steadily. I opened a new log entry. Multiple contacts confirmed. I did not assign a number. It would change. I watched. The system attempted classification again. It began to assign categories. Warship. Transport. Civilian. Then it stopped. The categories did not hold. The composition did not follow structure. It adjusted. Re-attempted. Failed again. I recorded that. Composition inconsistent with doctrine. Command initiated a briefing. All senior personnel to report. I was not required to attend. I attended. Records officers do not speak in briefings. We observe. We document. We ensure the record exists. The command room was unchanged. Order. Precision. Control. Fleet Commander Ethren stood at the center. He was a controlled man. Measured. Exact. He looked at the display for a long time before speaking. Status. The sensor officer responded. Multiple inbound contacts. Range decreasing. Composition unclear. How many? Was unknown. This was the first deviation. Numbers are always known. Or estimated. Unknown is not a standard response. I recorded it. The display updated. More signatures resolved. The number stabilized briefly. Then increased again. Not because new contacts appeared. Because existing ones clarified. They had always been there. We had not seen them. Composition, the commander asked. Mixed, the officer replied. Military and non-military. A pause followed. Not long. Enough. Define. Warships approximately 30%. Remaining contacts civilian class. Cargo, transport, medical, agricultural. Silence. I recorded that. It did not fit. Not within any known engagement model. Civilian vessels do not enter combat zones. They do not approach hostile forces. They do not align with military advance. Thus, I did not complete the thought. The sensor officer continued. They are not forming a standard approach vector. The display shifted. Projected paths. Lines crossing. Converging. Not into formation. Into proximity. I stepped closer to the display. This is not standard. I did it anyway. The trajectories were clear. Not a fleet. Not separate units. A convergence. From multiple origins. Toward a single point. Toward us. I spoke. This is also not standard. The civilian vessels are leading. The room turned. Not sharply. Controlled. But attention shifted. The sensor officer checked. Adjusted the overlay. Confirmed. Yes, he said. Forward position. Warships trailing. Silence again. This one longer. Heavier. Because now it was understood. Not fully. Enough. Fleet Commander Ethren did not react visibly. He never does. That is his function. What is their intent? He asked. No one answered immediately. Because there was no correct answer. Only interpretation. And interpretation requires context. I had context. I did not speak. Not yet. The tactical officer attempted response. Possible supply shield. Civilian vessels absorbing initial engagement. Incorrect. Not structurally. Conceptually. I spoke. They are not shielding. Again, not standard. Again I did it. The commander looked at me. Not with irritation. With assessment. Explain. I did not move. I did not adjust my tone. They are not positioned for defense, I said. They are positioned for presence. The pause. What does that mean? I held the answer for a fraction of a second. Then released it. They are not here to assist the warships. Another pause. They are here to witness. Silence. This time complete. No system noise. No movement. Just understanding beginning. Slowly. Reluctantly. The commander turned back to the display. He did not respond to my statement. He did not dismiss it. He continued. Prepare full tactical response. Orders followed. Precise. Efficient. Correct. Everything executed as it should be. I stepped back. Returned to observation. The display updated continuously. Numbers increased. Then stabilized. Final count reached. Not small. Not overwhelming. Sufficient. I recorded it. Then I stopped recording numbers. They were no longer the relevant variable. I returned to my station. The report was still open. The 64th. Unchanged. 3. I looked at it one final time. There is a point where origin becomes distant. where the initiating cause is no longer visible within the current frame. This was that point. The number had done its work. I minimized the report. For the first time since opening it. Not because it was resolved. Because it had moved beyond its position. I opened a communication channel. Human diplomatic frequency. Inactive. I initiated contact. I did not expect response. I identified myself. Designation. Function. I stated one thing. I am not a military officer. I paused. Then added. I recorded the incident. I transmitted it. The channel remained silent. Expected. I waited. 1 minute. The sensor readings continued. The fleet advanced. The civilian vessels held forward position. Still silent. Still steady. At 11 minutes, the channel opened. Immediate. No distortion. A voice. Human. Controlled. Precise. Are there children on your vessel? I had not prepared for that question. I answered immediately. No. The pause. Measured. Then you are not our target. I did not respond. There was nothing to respond with. The voice continued. Do you know why we are here? I did. I said it. Yes. Another pause. Then you understand. I did. Completely. In a way that no report had ever required before. The channel remained open for a moment longer. Then closed. I sat at my station. I did not move. I did not speak. I opened my personal log. Final entry before engagement. They did not come as a fleet. I paused. Then added. They came as a decision. I saved it. I closed the log. I looked at the sensor display. The distance had closed. Not completely. Enough. I placed my hands on the console. Not to act. To remain steady. There are moments when action is irrelevant. This was one. The pattern had completed. The response had arrived. And everything that followed would not change what had already been decided. The first impact did not register as a strike. It registered as a shift. A change in the way the ship held itself against space. Not collision. Not weapon discharge. The pressure moving through structure. Distant. Heavy. Final. I marked the time. Then I stopped marking time. Because from that point forward, time did not behave in a way that made marking it useful. The command channel activated. Fleet Commander Ithren's voice. Even. Controlled. Issuing directives. Formation adjustments. Target acquisition. Standard engagement protocol. Everything correct. Everything insufficient. I remained at my station. I did not move to observation. I did not attempt to see. Seeing was not required. The data was enough. The sensor feed changed. Rapidly. Not chaotic. Unpredictable. There is a difference. Chaos is random. This was not random. It was structured in a way the system could not process. The warship's signatures separated. Fragmented. Not into tactical lines. Into independent vectors. Each one moving with purpose. Without coordination visible to our systems. The tactical overlay attempted prediction. It failed. Repeatedly. I recorded that. Doctrine mismatch. The civilian vessels remained. Forward position. Unmoved. Unarmed. Unengaged. They did not fire. They did not retreat. They did not attempt evasion. They held position. Between. Anyway. No one else did. Not yet. The command channel intensified. Orders overlapping. Corrections issued. Countermeasures deployed. The system was responding. Correctly. To something it did not understand. I opened a new log entry. Not official. Personal. The engagement has begun. I paused. Then added. It was already decided. I saved it. I did not elaborate. There was nothing to elaborate. The outcome was not being created. It was being revealed. The first confirmed losses appeared on the display. Compact vessels. Not many. Then more. The numbers increased. Not exponentially. Steadily. Consistently. I did not track them. Tracking them would imply change. There was no change. Only continuation. The warship signatures moved through our formation. Not breaking it. Ignoring it. Selecting targets. Precise. Efficient. Unpredictable. The tactical overlay continued to fail classification. Unknown. 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 The word repeated across the display. Not as a label. As an admission. I recorded that. Unknown is not absence of data. It is absence of framework. I saved it. The civilian vessels still did not move. They remained. Watching. I understood that now completely. This was not a battle. This was an event. And events are witnessed. Not just executed. The command channel shifted. Not in tone. In density. More voices. More instructions. More corrections. Still controlled. Still ordered. But beneath it, not visible. Present. The first structural alarm activated. Not for our vessel. For another. Hull breach. Containment failure. Loss of integrity. Standard sequence. I have recorded similar sequences before. They did not feel the same. I did not write that down. Some observations are understood without record. The sensor feed intensified. More contacts. Closer. Faster. The system struggled to keep up. Not failing. Lagging. There is a difference. Failure is collapse. Lag is delay. Delay in this context was enough. I opened the communication logs. No external signals. Still silent. Completely. The silence had not ended. It had transformed. From absence to presence. I returned to the sensor feed. The medical vessel. I located it. Identified earlier. Still in position. Still not moving. Still not engaging. I recorded that. Support present before need. I paused. Then added. They expected this. I saved it. The command channel issued a new directive. Withdrawal thresholds defined. Not executed. Not yet. Still within acceptable engagement parameters. According to doctrine. Doctrine was no longer relevant. I knew that. The system did not. The first time I recognized the outcome fully was not at the beginning. Not when the silence started. Not when the sensors detected movement. It was here. In the middle. When everything was still functioning. And nothing was working. That is when it becomes clear. Not through failure. Through persistence. I opened the human communication channel again. I did not expect a response. I did not receive one. I closed it. There was nothing left to say. Nothing left to record in that direction. The engagement continued. Duration became indistinct. Minutes. Hours. The distinction lost relevance. The only consistent element was direction. One way. Forward. Uninterrupted. I opened the 64th report again. Not because it was required. Because it was origin. The number remained. 3. It had not changed. It did not need to. Everything that followed was already inside it. I minimized it again. Final. No further reference required. The command channel shifted again. Tone unchanged. Content altered. Prepare for threshold. I recorded that. This was the first true indicator. Not of loss. Of recognition. The system was beginning to understand. Not fully. Enough. The sensor feed showed reduction. Not in human vessels. In ours. Numbers decreasing. Capacity lowering. Structure weakening. The trajectory unchanged. I opened my personal log. Final entry during engagement. This cannot be reversed. I paused. Then added. It could have been prevented. I saved it. I closed the log. The command channel issued the order. Withdrawal. Finally. Correct. Too late. But correct. Our vessel had already been redirected. Administrative priority. Non-combat designation. We were moving. Away. The sensor feed began to lose clarity. Distance increasing. Signal weakening. The event continuing. Without us. I sat at my station. I did not move. I did not watch the viewport. I did not need to. I knew what was happening. Not in detail. In certainty. The silence had led here. The number had led here. The pattern had completed. The system would record this. Classify it. Analyze it. It would assign meaning after the fact. That is its function. My function is different. I record what is, not what is decided afterward. What is irreversible. I did not write that word. Not yet. The ship stabilized. Distance achieved. The sensor feed reduced to residual. The command channel quieted. Not silent. Reduced. Controlled again. The room returned to order. Externally. Internally. I remained at my station. Hands on the console. Still. The event had ended for us. It had not ended. It had only moved beyond our ability to observe it directly. I opened my personal log one final time. I did not add a new entry. I read the last one. Then I closed it. There was nothing more to record in the moment. Everything that mattered had already been written. The rest would be aftermath. And aftermath is always quieter. But it is never smaller. Not after something like this. I am writing this from a different station. Not by reassignment. By survival. The vessel remains intact. That is the official description. Structurally sound. Operationally reduced. Personnel accounted for within acceptable loss parameters. The language is precise. It is also insufficient. We did not experience the end of the engagement. We experienced the distance from it. There is a difference. I have been given temporary access to a workspace at a civilian transit hub in Sector 12. It belongs to Lyra 5. She allowed me to use it without question. She had begun her own preparations before the engagement concluded. I consider this relevant. I am continuing the log. Not because it is required. Because it is necessary. The first thing I will record is what the engagement looked like from my station. Not visually. Numerically. Structurally. The first 40 minutes followed doctrine. Our fleet responded correctly. Formation held. Countermeasures deployed. Tactical predictions executed with high accuracy against expected behavior. The human vessels did not behave as expected. This is not an observation of unpredictability. It is an observation of incompatibility. Our systems were designed to interpret known patterns. The patterns presented were not known. The warship signatures moved independently, not randomly, with intent that did not align with any recorded doctrine. They did not press advantage in a single vector. They did not concentrate force in a predictable manner. They distributed, selected, engaged, then moved again. Each action precise. Each action unpatterned. The tactical overlay attempted classification repeatedly. It failed repeatedly. The display shifted from labeled threats to a single repeated designation. Unknown. Not because we lacked data. Because the data did not conform. I have reviewed the log since. The system was functioning within parameters. The parameters were insufficient. The civilian vessels remained in forward position for the entire duration. They did not fire. They did not assist in targeting. They did not withdraw. They held position. Between. This disrupted the tactical officers more than the weapons fire. This is not speculation. It is recorded in their communications. Repeated attempts to assign function. Shielding. Sensor interference. None were correct. They were not there for tactical advantage. They were there for presence. I understood that during the engagement. I understand it more clearly now. A civilization does not bring its civilians into a conflict zone to increase efficiency. It brings them because something must be seen. The engagement lasted approximately 7 hours. I say approximately because duration became indistinct. Not due to confusion. Due to continuity. There was no moment of reversal. No shift in direction. Only progression. At the point of withdrawal, our fleet capacity had reduced below operational threshold. The order was given. It was followed. The human vessels did not pursue our administrative unit. This is also important. They allowed us to leave. Not because they could not prevent it. Because we were not the purpose. I have reviewed 14 separate accounts from personnel present during the engagement. Each one describes a different moment as the point where outcome became clear. There is no single moment. This is consistent across all accounts. Understanding did not arrive as an event. It accumulated. Gradually. Until it was complete. I did not observe a moment of realization. I observed a condition, a sustained recognition that nothing we did altered the direction of what was happening. This is not defeat in the conventional sense. Defeat implies opposition with potential variance in outcome. This did not contain variance. It contained certainty. I have been asked to contribute to the official assessment. I have declined initial requests. I will submit one. It will be correct. It will not be complete. This log is the complete version. The official version will include fleet composition, loss ratios, tactical deviations, recommended protocol adjustments. It will classify the human response as high-threat, irregular engagement behavior. It will assign new parameters, new doctrines, new thresholds. All of that is appropriate. All of that is insufficient, because it does not address the cause. I will record the cause here, not as a classification, as an observation. The compact evaluated humans using standard metrics: physical resilience, technological capability, fleet tonnage, political cohesion. All measurements placed them within mid-tier classification. This was accurate. Within those metrics, the metrics were incomplete. They did not include response to loss of dependence. This variable was not considered, not because it was unknown, because it was not measured. We have no comprehensive data on how species respond when their children are harmed. This is a gap, a significant one. The 64th report contained 3. 3 is not a large number. It is not a strategic loss. It does not alter military balance. Within standard evaluation, it is minimal. This is where the assessment failed. 3 is not a number in this context. It is a trigger. I have reviewed human biological research since the engagement, not military analysis. Physiology. Their bodies respond to threat with chemical alteration, increased reaction speed, reduced pain response, heightened focus. This is documented. What is not documented in our assessments is the scale at which this response applies. It is not limited to trained individuals. It is universal. Every human carries it. Every human can access it. This is not the critical factor. The critical factor is what activates it. Not threat to self. Threat to others. Specifically, to their children. I am not a scientist. I am a records officer. I do not assign meaning beyond observation. But the pattern is clear. The silence was not hesitation. It was transition. From communication to action. The convergence was not strategy. It was response. The civilian presence was not support. It was necessity. They came because they had to. Not because it was efficient. Not because it was ordered. Because the alternative did not exist. This is difficult to classify. Our system does not contain a category for it. We categorize threat. We do not categorize inevitability. I have considered multiple ways to define what occurred. None are sufficient. So I will not define it. I will describe it. A species that records the personal belongings of its children in transit manifests. A species that allows those children to decorate their tools without function. A species that carries small objects across vast distances because those objects matter to individuals without strategic value. When such a species experiences loss, the response is not proportional. It is absolute. This is not a military behavior. It is not a political behavior. It is not a strategic behavior. It is a structural one. It does not scale with numbers. It activates fully. At any number. 3 was enough. 1 would have been enough. This is the part the official report will not include. Because it cannot be measured. Because it cannot be adjusted. Because it cannot be countered. It can only be avoided. I have reviewed the original report again. The 64th. I finally closed it. Not because it is resolved. Because it is complete. There is nothing more to extract from it. Everything it contained has already occurred. The number remains 3. It will always remain 3. It will not increase. It will not decrease. It will not change. It will only continue. In consequence, I am finalizing this log. Not because there is nothing more to say. Because the necessary part has been said. The official report will recommend revised engagement protocols, enhanced communication safeguards, reclassification of human threat tier. All of these are correct. None of them address the origin. The origin is simple, and it does not require analysis. Do not harm their children. This is not a warning. It is not a threat. It is a description. Some actions initiate sequences. Some sequences cannot be stopped. Some outcomes, once begun, cannot be altered. I submitted a final note with the official assessment. It was declined. Not a standard classification. I include it here. For completeness. Irreversible. Not as judgment. As fact. Everything else is just the number 3. They asked me to rewrite it. Not the facts. The tone. The Diplomatic Reconstruction Office returned my submission with annotations. Language flagged. Phrasing marked as non-standard. Certain lines identified as interpretive. Recommendations were included. Replace certainty with probability. Replace description with classification. Remove the final word. Irreversible. I read their notes twice. Then I opened a new document. Not the official report. This one. There is a difference between a record that is accepted and a record that is true. Accepted records fit. True records persist. I am a records officer. I know which one matters. I will finish this now. Not as analysis. As completion. In the 42 days since the engagement, the compact has begun adjustment. Protocols revised. Engagement thresholds updated. Human classification elevated. Diplomatic channels reopened. Carefully. Cautiously. There has been no further conflict. This is being interpreted as stabilization. It is not. It is distance. There is a difference. Distance allows for the appearance of control. It does not restore it. I have been asked directly, in multiple contexts, a version of the same question. Are humans dangerous? The question is incomplete. Danger is conditional. It requires context. It requires proximity. It requires action. I will answer the question correctly. Humans are not dangerous by default. They are not aggressive without cause. They are not expansionist beyond necessity. They are not unstable in the way our early assessments suggested. All of those statements are accurate. They are also irrelevant, because they describe the state before. The relevant question is different. What happens after? We did not ask that. We measured capacity. We did not measure response. We evaluated strength. We did not evaluate limit. This was the failure. Not of intelligence. Of assumption. We assumed that all species operate within scalable response models. That loss produces proportional reaction. That escalation follows predictable curves. Humans do not follow that model. Loss does not scale. It activates. Fully. Immediately. Without reduction. This is not speculation. It is recorded. It is observable. It has now occurred. I have reviewed the archived data from the Lathan system collapse again. Not for confirmation. For comparison. The structure is identical. Different scale. Different context. Same sequence. Silence. Convergence. Event. We labeled that incident as historical. We categorized it. We stored it. We did not integrate it. That is another form of forgetting. Not absence of memory. Absence of application. We will not make that error again. Not because we have learned. Because we have experienced. There is a difference. Learning allows for adjustment. Experience enforces it. I have also reviewed human communications since the event. External channels resumed after 19 days. Gradually. Without announcement. Without explanation. Trade resumed. Civilian traffic normalized. Diplomatic signals re-established. There was no statement. No declaration. No acknowledgement of what occurred. This has been interpreted as restraint. It is. But not in the way it is being discussed. Restraint is not the absence of action. It is the completion of it. They did not stop. They finished. Then they returned to normal function. This is another aspect we did not measure. Termination. Not escalation. Not withdrawal. Completion. Once the response is complete, it ends. Cleanly. Without continuation. Without excess. This is not cruelty. It is precision. I have considered the civilian vessels again. The ones that held position. The ones that did not move. I have reviewed their logs where available. Minimal data. Limited transmission. One repeated pattern. Presence. No communication. No interference. No retreat. They were there to see. This is not something our system understands. We do not include witnessing as a functional role. Humans do. They require it. For reasons that are not tactical. Not strategic. Structural. The thing happened. It needed to be seen. So they came. All of them. Not just the ones who fight. The ones who live. This is the part one find the most difficult to reduce into formal language. So I will not reduce it. I will state it. They did not send a fleet. They sent themselves. Every classification we applied failed at that point. Because we were no longer observing a military action. We were observing a collective decision. And collective decisions of that scale do not behave like fleets. They behave like forces. Not physical. Directional. I have one final observation. It is not technical. It is not analytical. It is simple. The 64th report included a single item in the personal effects column that did not belong to any operational category. A small audio device. Decorated. Carried by a child. Recovered in fragments. That item did not alter the report. It did not change classification. It did not affect the outcome of the incident in any measurable way. And yet, it is the only part of the report that persisted. Not in the system. In effect, I added it to my personal archive. Not because it was required. Because it was real. Records are meant to preserve reality. Not just structure. I will close this log now. There is nothing more to add that would increase its accuracy. Only repetition. And repetition does not strengthen truth. It only delays acceptance. The official report will exist. It will be read. It will be referenced. It will inform future decisions. This log will also exist. Perhaps not officially. Perhaps not immediately. But records persist. They are found. Eventually. When they are needed. This is read. Then the sequence is understood. Not in detail. In structure. That is enough. I will end with the line that was removed. Not because it is dramatic. Because it is correct. Irreversible. Not as a warning. Not as a conclusion. As a property. Some actions cannot be undone. Some numbers cannot be reduced. Some silences, once chosen, carry everything that follows. Do not harm their children. This is not guidance. It is the whole record. Everything else is just the number 3. I did not intend to add anything further. The log was complete. The sequence was documented. The conclusion had been stated. But records have a tendency to extend when something remains unresolved. Not externally. Internally. There is one more detail. It does not change the outcome. It clarifies it. 3 days after I finalized the previous entry, I received a transmission. Not through official channels. Direct. Unrouted. This is not possible under standard protocol. It occurred anyway. The signal was clean. No distortion. No encryption barrier I could detect. It opened without request. I did not initiate it. I accepted it. The voice was familiar. Not personally. Contextually. I had heard it once before. Measured. Controlled. Are you still recording? She asked. I did not answer immediately. Not because I needed time. Because I understood the question was not procedural. It was specific. Yes, I said. The pause. Acknowledged. Good, she replied. No identification was given. None was required. I recognized her. The same voice from the channel before the engagement. I did not ask how she accessed the line. I did not ask why. Those questions were not relevant. She had contacted me. That was sufficient. I read your report, she said. This was not possible. The official report had not been shared externally. The personal log had not been transmitted. I did not respond to that. She continued. You record things correctly, she said. It was not praise. It was assessment. I accepted it. Thank you, I said. Another pause. But you are missing one part. I did not speak. I waited. You think this was about 3, she said. I felt the correction before I understood it. Not disagreement. Adjustment. It was not, she continued. I remained still. You are a records officer, she said. So record this. I did. Not on the system. Not yet. There were 9 on that convoy, she said. Yes, I replied. 6 came back, she said. Yes. The pause. Longer this time. Measured. There are no numbers for the other 3, she said. I did not understand immediately. Then I did. Not as data. As absence. They are not entries, she said. They are not counts. They are not losses. I remained silent. They are not something that becomes smaller when you say it differently, she said. Another pause. But they are everything. I did not respond. There was nothing to respond with that would not reduce what she had said. You keep saying 3, she continued. Yes. That is where you are wrong, she said. The statement was not hostile. Not corrective. Accurate. It is not 3, she said. Silence followed. I did not interrupt it. Then she said, it is always all of them. I felt that. Not as information. As structure. Something aligning. Something completing. You think we came because of 3, she said. Yes. Another pause. But we came because there were children. No emphasis. No increase in tone. No emotional variance. Just statement. That is the number, she said. I closed my eyes briefly. Not to rest. To isolate. To understand. I opened them again. The console was unchanged. The room was unchanged. Everything external remained consistent. Apparently. Complete. I spoke. Quietly. Yes. She did not respond immediately. When she did, her voice had not changed. You recorded it, she said. But you didn't see it. I accepted that. I see it now, I said. The pause. Good. The transmission remained open. Neither of us spoke. There are moments where continuation is unnecessary. This was one. After several seconds, she said one final thing. Tell them not to do it again. Not a threat. Not a warning. A statement of process. I understood. I will record it, I said. That's enough, she replied. The channel closed. No signal drop. No distortion. It was present. Then it was not. I remained at the console. I did not move. I did not open a new log entry immediately. I sat with it. There is a difference between correction and completion. This was completion. I opened the log. I did not edit previous entries. They remain accurate. They remain necessary. But they were incomplete. Now they are not. I added one final entry. Not an amendment. Not a revision. An addition. The number is incorrect. I paused. Then wrote. It is not 3. Another pause. But it is all of them. I saved it. I closed the log. I did not reopen it. There is nothing more to add. The record is complete. Not because everything has been said. Because the correct thing has been understood. Do not harm their children. Not because of consequence. Because there is no smaller version of that act. There is no reduced form. There is no acceptable number. There is only the line. And once crossed, it is already everything. Everything else was never the number. I was informed, some days later, that the compact had finalized its revised doctrine. Not publicly. Not announced. Integrated. Quietly. The way significant changes are made when those making them understand that visibility is not the priority. Survival is. I was not asked to contribute further. My part in the official process had concluded. This was expected. Records officers are most useful before decisions are made. Afterward, we become archives. I do not object to this. Archives persist longer than decisions. I obtained a copy of the revised protocols. Not through request. Through access. There is a difference. The document was structured as all such documents are. Layered. Categorized. New classifications. Expanded threat matrices. Adjusted engagement thresholds. It was thorough. It was correct. It was insufficient. Not because it lacked detail. Because it still attempted to solve the problem within the existing framework. The framework is the problem. I did not annotate the document. I did not submit corrections. I did not respond. Instead, I added one line to my personal archive. Framework unchanged. That is the only relevant note. Because everything that matters exists outside it. I have reviewed human activity continuously since the engagement. Not as surveillance. As observation. There has been no escalation. No further mobilization. No deviation from prior patterns. They have returned to what they were doing. Farming. Transport. Construction. Communication. The same feeds I observed before remain active. Unaltered. At least externally. There is no visible indication that anything has changed. This has caused confusion, concern, misinterpretation. Within the compact, there is an expectation that an event of that scale produces lasting external markers, territorial claims, political demands, ongoing hostility. None of these have occurred. This is being discussed as unpredictability. It is not. It is completion. The action was taken. The response was delivered. There is nothing further to do. This is consistent. It only appears inconsistent because we expect continuation. We expect escalation to extend. They do not operate that way. They resolve. Then they stop. I have identified this as a distinct operational pattern. Not cyclical. Terminal. It activates. It executes. It ends. No residual behavior. No gradual decline. No strategic exploitation of advantage. This is not restraint as we define it. It is closure. I have added that to my archive as well. Response includes termination. This is important because it defines the boundary, not just of action, of an action. Once the line is crossed and the response completes, the system resets. Not to previous state, to new baseline. We are currently within that baseline. It is stable. It will remain stable. Thus, the condition is triggered again. I will not write the condition again. It has already been recorded. Multiple times. Clarity does not increase with repetition. I have also reviewed internal compact communications. There is division. Not overt. Structural. Some factions interpret the event as anomaly. A unique convergence of variables unlikely to repeat. They argue for caution. But not fundamental change. Others interpret it as revelation. A previously unmeasured constant now observed. They argue for complete reevaluation of engagement philosophy. Both positions are being considered. Neither is sufficient, because both attempt to place the event within models that assume variability. This is the error. There is no variability in the condition. Only in the circumstances that trigger it. The outcome remains constant. I have not presented this conclusion. It would not be accepted. Not because it is incorrect. Because it is incompatible with existing systems. Systems resist incompatible truths. Until they cannot. I have been asked one final question. Not formally. In conversation. By Lyra. We were in the workspace. The same one. She had been reviewing transit logs. Routine work. She paused. Looked at me. And asked, "Are we safe?" It is a simple question. It is also the only one that matters. I considered it. Not in terms of reassurance. In terms of accuracy. Yes, I said. She waited. I continued. As long as we do not repeat the action that caused this. She nodded. No further clarification requested. None required. Safety is conditional. It always has been. The difference now is that we understand the condition. Not completely. Sufficiently. I have one final entry to make. Not in the official archive. Where it will remain unaltered. The compact did not lose because it was weaker. It did not lose because it was unprepared. It did not lose because it made an error in execution. It lost because it did not understand what it was engaging. Not the species. The boundary. There are many ways to measure power. We use most of them. We measure force, range, capacity, efficiency. We did not measure limit. Not the limit of what a species can do. The limit of what it will allow. Humans have a limit. It is not flexible. It is not negotiable. It is not scalable. It is absolute. We found it. That is all that happened. Everything else was consequence. I will not add further to this record. It is complete. Not because there is nothing left. Because what remains does not change what is already established. If this is read in the future, then the purpose is served. Not to warn. Not to instruct. To remember. Because forgetting is the only path that leads back to the same point. And the same point leads to the same outcome. Do not harm their children. There is nothing beyond that which needs to be understood. Everything else is already known.